Mike, welcome to the Leanpub launch video for Build Your Own RPG Dungeon Crawler in Python. I was wondering if you could take a moment to talk to all of us a little bit about yourself and who you are and what you do and what your book is about and who it's for.
Sure. My name is Mike Gold, and I've been on the Lens podcast once before for our previous book. Um, I've been a software engineer for many years, mostly in Microsoft technology, and currently I do consulting in web technologies as well as currently I am doing Microsoft technology as well. Um, and yeah, two interesting projects. One's like a medical diagnostic project, and others um, uh, oil appraisal software.
Very cool. And in the
And
meantime, you've managed to write another fun book.
yes, I found time in between to do that. So yeah, I enjoy it. That's fun. It's
Yeah,
kind of
the
hobby.
book is really amazing. So I mean, it's about building roguelike games, and you have this great, very fun to read introduction at the beginning. Fun to read, but also kind of like very straight and to the point. I really loved it. So you talk about the your take on the origins of roguelike games. So before we define roguelike, can you tell us the, at least to me, kind of surprising origins of roguelike games?
Yeah. So I was actually introduced to a roguelike game years ago. I was working for RCA and they had the VAX machines. This was before I think PCs. And believe it or not, they ran, I guess one of the um, developers there put Moria on the VAX so we could all play after hours. And and that was, one of the first roguelike games I played. They they became popular. And for the audience out there, what's wondering what's a roguelike game? They're basically these Dungeon and Dragon text ASCII character games. The entire dungeon is represented with keys from the keyboard and not fancy graphics. For example, the player is an at sign. So anyway, these games were, you know, um, these became games were sort of popular back then. And IBM had come up with a game called Hack, which later became NetHack, and there was a whole slew of them like Rogue. And there's a lot of nostalgia because nobody plays these as much anymore. But they were fun. I mean, even with the crappy graphics, they were fun to play. You really it had the feel of a Dungeons and Dragons campaign.
Yeah, well, it's actually interesting. There's something very specific to talk about that when it comes to what an attack is. And I was kind of like, in a way, kind of like that you put things so well in your book that they seem obvious once you read them, but like it's the kind of thing that I actually haven't thought about before. And so actually, I'll just jump to that. So you're going to be with this book, you'll learn how to program your own roguelike game
Yes,
in the Python programming language. It's very popular. Lots of people learn it. Lots of people, when they're learning programming, they actually learn it through Python and stuff like that. And there's this one thing where you talk about the basics of an attack. And it's sort of very funny if you've ever done any D&D or something like that. Like the basics of an attack is like right on. They can't. What's that? What are these? And you say combat in a roguelike, stripped down to its core, is just a roll to see if you hit and a number to subtract if you do. We'll start
that's
there and
really
add
what it
flavor
boils down
later.
to. Yeah.
And I never
Well,
thought about it that way before. But an attack is like kind of like rolling, like in D&D.
it's like rolling the dice. Exactly.
Yeah,
It's right after. So, well, in this one, you're actually just bumping into the monster and losing points or get or the monster loses points. So
yeah, yeah. No, it's awesome to just to strip it down, think of it that way. But then as programming, you sort of like, for example, the example you use when you start by building the map is it's all walls. And you're like, don't worry, we'll make floor space later. But look, we built a dungeon that's all walls. And then you learn how to build walls and how walls work. One thing I really
exactly.
like about the beginning of your book as well is you invoke the fact that there's nerds have been arguing about what this and that is, including roguelike games for a long time. But one of the things I love about your description there is that the first thing you mention is permadeath. Um, and it's very funny. I've got this funny thing like I didn't play video games for a long time, and then I got back into them when I got a Switch and I played Zelda Breath of the Wild. And
Right. My son played that. Yeah. Yeah.
and
It's
one
like,
thing when I would watch videos online of people playing and stuff, one thing that was I found totally alienating was that people didn't care about dying. Um, and when I was a
it's true.
kid, my dad would give me 2 quarters. And then it's like that if we went to like if there was a video game machine around, and like that meant I had 2 games. And when you died, you died. Like
Yeah, you
that was
lost
it.
that quarter. It was, yeah, exactly.
And so I
Most
just
video games are
internalized the
like
kind of
that.
fear of video game death.
I
And I
think a lot
couldn't
of
get
people
over it.
have that.
But anyway, with roguelike games are now very popular. They're back, Hades that used to say Dead Cells, Slay the Spire, stuff like that. And they had permadeath, and it's a feature that like even people who grew up on games where you could, you know, come back to life as many times as you wanted, it's turned out that permadeath is actually also popular for certain
It is.
gaming
I mean, there's
sessions.
a game called Pixel Dungeon. I think it's on Android, and you can go down. You accumulated all this wealth and all these, and all of a sudden you're dead. And that's your character is gone. You start over. So
And
yeah,
so
this is that kind of game, and you will die if you play this. I mean, it's a very simple version
yeah.
to teach you, but yeah, that's in there for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. Another example of that you say right at the beginning that makes a roguelike is procedural generation. Turn-based play. When you move, the world moves. When you stand still, the world's not moving, which is just very, very, very cool when you sort of think about that. And grid-based movement and deep systems and simple presentation. So I guess I've done a lot of talking actually because I just love the book so much. But who's your book for?
I think I was thinking my books for those nostalgic for these games that you can't find them as much now. Use a simple Python program to start building your own, if you're a hobbyist. But I think it's also geared to people to learn Python in a really fun way. Although you probably have to come up with another book to explain all the code, but it does sort of step you through step by step, and it shows you the code as you're doing it. So it is also for those wanting to learn, how to do this.
Yeah, well, the book definitely achieves that. I mean, you'll have fun learning programming or learning Python, or you'll have fun learning how to make dungeon crawlers in Python if you already know a little bit. And no matter who you are, you could just read it and do no programming and learn about how these games work and what the underlying mechanics are. So it's a really great book for anyone interested in all those things. It's Build Your Own RPG Dungeon Crawler in Python, a complete roguelike tutorial by Mike Gold. Thank you very much, Mike, for taking the time to do this launch video with me today.
Thank you so much, Len. Thanks for having me.